This is the Today with Tally podcast.
And welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast. Folks, look, we got a big show in store for you today. The government is reopened after, about a 43-day layoff. The largest in U.S. history. But you know what? That doesn't surprise me because anytime President Donald J. Trump is in office, they try to do firsts for everything because they love to fight a man who loves his country. Now, about a year ago, I was introduced to this Adam DeRito out of Colorado. Come to find out that he went to the Air Force Academy. His childhood dream out of New York was to fly jets. Well, he would go all the way through the academy and then be pulled from graduation on that football field there at the Air Force Academy. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a trailer before this one comes out so you guys can kind of remember this man's horrifying story. But, you know, he's been fighting for well over 15 years for military justice and accountability. So what happened to him and so many other cadets out there never happens again. Now, we went to D.C. this last week, old DeRito and I, and we walked those halls of Congress going door to door urging, not lawmakers because they weren't in town, urging their staffers to do the right thing, take effective notes, and to bring in the perfectly written one-pagers that are basically bills in a bag to give to their boss to, one, either sign on to my active House bill, H.R. 2640, or to be a champion to the DeRito Act, the Military Mental Health and Justice and Protection Act, also known as the DeRito Act, to ensure the rights and the protections of all U.S. Military Academy service members. That's not a very hard ask, if you ask me, especially if you know Adam's story. Now, we were walking those halls of Congress, and there's nobody else there. There's no lobbyists there because they're not getting paid. Folks, this job that DeRito and I are out there doing the hard work for veterans, it doesn't come with a paycheck, folks. This is absolutely blood, sweat, tears, determination, dedication, and love of country that sent us back to those halls of Congress to do the hard work, to do the job that our representatives have failed to do for generations. What's it going to take? We are approaching the midterms here. Again, it's election season. It seems like it's always election season. But right now, I'm going to bring in Adam DeRito, and we're going to share what we did last week on Capitol Hill. And with that, Mr. DeRito, what is up, brother?
Brian, it's great to be back on the show. Thank you so much for inviting me on here again.
Boy, I was starting to get a little passionate there a little bit. And all of a sudden, you're like, well, hello.
Yeah, I mean, that happens in the work that we do, right, Brian?
Yeah.
You know, people think that military justice reform or advocating for veterans, you know, and it's one thing that drives me nuts is that all these politicians, they always use, we're going to help veterans and serve veterans as part of their campaign speech to draw in votes. And then at the end of the day, like I said, it's just you and me walking the halls in D.C. at 320 million people or however many people are in this country. We're the only two actually doing the work when the work is the hardest to get done, even during a shutdown, right? And for veterans like us, you know, and I'm still serving in the reserve as a captain, you know, it's who is going to go and do this work. And I just want to thank you so much for actually showing up and walking side by side with me to do the hard things because, like I said, I've done this on my own for 15 years. And, you know, you have people that are always coming in and out of your life. And most of them are doing it for money or for the political grift or for access and photo ops. But we weren't there for photo ops, Brian. We were there to actually do the hard work, do the right thing because we are moral and ethical people that have served our country in uniform.
You know, look, I agree, but I got to give one member of Congress from the House, from the U.S. House of Representatives credit, Congressman Mike Lawler.
Yes.
This guy was in his office. He came out the back door, and I said, that right there is the congressman. I stopped him dead in his tracks, and Adam and I had a good conversation with this member of Congress. He was the only one I saw on the Hill because everybody else was back in district on vacation, sipping pina coladas. And hey, look, Lawler did the right thing. Lawler was in there, and he was still doing the job and the duty of a member of Congress. So I've got to give credit where it is due. He is the congressman out of New York, and it's just, I don't know, it's poetic. You're from New York. I mean, what were the odds of that?
Yeah, I mean, it was really great seeing him, and like I said, I was born in New York, grew up in New Jersey, so I'm a very much East Coast person before I went to the Air Force Academy out west in Colorado in the cowboy country. But it was good to see that there are still some members of Congress and members of our government that care. And, even when the things are hard and everyone's not getting paid, they're still showing up to do the work. And I think it's really up to us, Brian, to really inspire the next generation, the millennials, the Gen Zers, the Gen Ayers, to actually understand that it is our responsibility to ensure that we continue to elect people like Mike Lawler into office to ensure that they represent us, that they do the hard work, that they remember that they are public servants. They're supposed to be servant leaders at the end of the day.
That's where the disconnect has really come into place. And that disconnect has been there for quite some time, but even more now because of the political violence that we've been seeing in our country just gives them some more reasons not to engage with their constituents. Now, they'll come out and say, I'm going to fight for you, and they will beg you, literally, like you see these folks in two different, it's almost like a Lindsey Graham. Oh my God, just donate to my campaign. It's a different guy. They get elected, and all of a sudden they look at you like, who's this guy? I'm way above your pay grade. Oh, I don't need to do a town hall because, we have political violence in this country. That's a good scapegoat there. Now I don't need to go do this. I can just do it online. And really, I don't really need to even show my face. I can have my, my secretary do it. I can have my chief of staff, all of my staffers do all the work for me. All the while, all I do is find a camera, get out in front of it, rile up my constituents, piss off the nation, depending on what side you're on, and go about heading out to the Capitol Hill Grill to toast to the guy
next
that
big donor, right? The next big
Yeah.
donor or whoever's going to inspire them. And I think that's the problem with DC. And this is something I've criticized people a lot on. Like I said, I've been in DC longer than some of my own representatives, right? And once you learn the system and the backroom smoky deals that get made, you only need to be in DC Monday through Wednesday, maybe Monday through Thursday, and you should be going home or at least every other weekend. I understand that might be cost prohibitive for some people, but for the most part, is they become so entwined with a very small group of powerful people in DC that they think that's the only thing they need to do to survive. When really you need to be connecting with the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of constituents you have in your district and make sure that they are still represented. So when you go home, it's so important to stop at that local coffee shop. It's so important to go connect with that small business owner to show that you care. And I think you and I, Brian, know this, is that when you actually talk to members of Congress, they're just normal people. They're not gods. They're not kings, right? And some of them think that way. I mean, you have Senator Chuck Schumer, who, is throwing cheese on raw meat on a grill because the guy doesn't even know how to use a grill, apparently. And we need to elect more real Americans, right? And this is my biggest push is we as veterans, we see the hundreds of podcasts everywhere. Everyone's always complaining about the government and all this change and everything else. You are actually out there doing the work and going back to DC to actually pass bills. And I always challenge all the vet bros. Hey, you got this awesome podcast and you got all these views and stuff, and you're talking about Aristotle or whatever, leadership thing you want to do. So what are you going to do about it? Why aren't you in DC? Why aren't you walking the halls? Why aren't you running for office? You have all these great ideas and all these great things, but at the end of the day, you hung up your uniform and you think that when you hang up your uniform that the work stops. We took an oath to the Constitution of the United States to defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I think you probably agree with me. My time overseas is there is a foreign enemy. And sometimes I had to respect them because, they have their ideologies and they're out there to kill me just as much as we're out there to kill them. But in reality, the biggest enemies I've ever fought are domestically. They're the ones not upholding their constitutional oaths. They're the ones that are in it for themselves. They're there to insider stock trade and everything else. And I think it's time for us as veterans to recognize now is the time, especially in the midterms, for us to put our so-called uniforms back on and get back into public service. And oh yeah, is it going to take your time, your treasure, your sanity, time away from your family? Yeah, but you're willing to leave your family to go to Iraq for a year. So what does it mean that you show up to a couple of local GOP meetings or DNC meetings if you're a Democrat? You know, we got to be bipartisan on that. And start showing up to the local precinct meetings and your district captain meetings and your local GOP or, Democrat office meetings to get in the system, to start participating, whether it's your local school boards, your water boards, your county commissioners, anything. Because if you sit idly by and just bitch on a podcast all the time and get nothing done, nothing is going to change. And like what I've learned in this entire bill process, Brian, and I went all the way to the 10th District Court of Appeals with my case, the highest court next to the Supreme Court. And even they said, we can't do anything because under Parker versus Levy, even though your constitutional rights were violated, that the military is a separate society and should be treated as such, and therefore we cannot tell the military what to do, even though you were unjustifiably had your medical records falsified. So then you go to the Secretary of Defense, and then you go to the Secretary of the Air Force, and then you go to the President of the United States, and then you go to this BS IG investigation that they are all complicit in, and even they won't do anything. So what's the next step, Brian? We have to go to our legislators to change the law, because that's the only thing they have to listen to. They don't have to listen to my sad story. They don't have to listen to the women that got raped and nothing happened. Or I had, Cadet Toledo a couple weeks ago took his own life because he entered the same situation that I did at the Air Force Academy. And no one cares. Not a single member of Congress cares because there's no law that requires them to do anything. So the only thing we can do, and you have done it successfully, is pass laws that actually protect veterans and service members. And we have to do the work, and that's going to require you to put your uniform back on, stop your complaining, stop being complicit in the problem, and get out there and do the work. Because, the last line in our Declaration of Independence states that we pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And if those guys were willing to lose their families and have their houses burned down and die penniless, then we also must be willing to make the same types of sacrifices in order to save our republic.
Very well said. And I got to piggyback on something here because it really resonated with me. Veterans will complain about everything. And there's only a few of us that are actually standing up and engaging to protect those veterans from the very problems and the groans and the complaints that they have. And look, I get it. Not everybody is geared to go have these difficult conversations with members of Congress. Not everybody is geared to, walk those halls of Congress and to literally have this pitch over and over again, talking about some of the most difficult times of our life. And always bringing up all of this horrible stuff, but we're doing it for the good of the country. We're doing it to protect everybody that is out there complaining about how bad they have it. And then when we're there, we're also bringing up, hey, I'm also hearing a lot about A, B, C, and D, and E. So we need to look at all these other areas too within the veteran community, whether it's long wait times, not being able to get in to see the dentist, in less than a year, having your claims completely denied all the time, having your representation not call you back. And this is where everything really starts to unravel within the veteran community. They get very upset. They lose their bearing. And then before you know it, they've got problems in the VA, between the anger management, VA police, and then they've got other issues that have become bigger now, because so many of these veterans don't want to stand up and actually do the hard work. And it is hard work. It is a ton of emails, and it's fighting for yourself. It's advocating for yourself.
Yeah.
So again, when you're sitting on a podcast that has a shit ton of viewers, again, I'm not shock content. I don't do shock content. I put out real life stories, real life value, real life meaning, and actually talk about, again, the things that nobody wants to do. It's just that everybody talks about doing, but never fulfills, the mission of what they want to see happen. Now, it's so much easier just to say, oh, I want to participate in a mob-like setting, not from the veteran community, but from the other side, right? From a completely different side that I look at that is always out there advocating. They actually stand up and bitch, but they actually do mobilize. And I got to give it to them. They are always in the streets, but they hit the streets in a very dishonorable way, in a very unpatriotic, un-American way.
Yes.
They will burn the American flag. They will burn our cities down. They will do whatever that they can to have their voice heard, but that's the easy way. Let's go burn it down and torch it, and then let's have a conversation. Well, can you imagine? I mean, literally, when we're walking the halls of Congress, it is 100% professionalism. I'm talking, we're in the jacket, we have a tie on. We are representing not just us, but 20.2 million American veterans in this country.
Exactly.
So when we go in there and when we speak on behalf of just not us, we're speaking on behalf of every veteran in this country that deserves rights, transparency, accountability, and justice at the highest levels. Now, Adam, why do these folks on the other side, or these other people that are always advocating in a mostly peaceful way, why do these people get all the run and all the attention all the time? Is it because of the shock content?
It is, and unfortunately, also a lot of it becomes a selfish grift. And I will call out some of the veterans in my own community now. There's a big problem with the reinstatement of the COVID-19 vaccine mandate, right? Which I fully support. I think if you were unlawfully discharged, that you should be able to be reinstated at the rank you left at, maybe with some back pay if that's deemed acceptable. But even then, they're not legally required to. And people don't understand, like, I spent 15 years to get my commission back. And even though I should be a lieutenant colonel, I was gracious and humbled that they let me be a captain at an 03. Right? Do I think I'm entitled to that rank of 05? No. Did I serve my command time? No. But I'm not going to demand something I haven't officially fully earned. And I was absolutely indebted to Tulsi Gabbard and the Secretary of War that they reinstated me as a captain from E5, which I think is outstanding. And even now, like, I still have a $240,000 debt in my record. I still don't have my degree back, even though I won my case. Right? But that's the next fight. We keep pushing, right? But people don't understand, like, I'm here to serve my country. I'm here to do the right thing. So when I see all the people involved in the vaccine stuff or other VA issues where they want everything, they want $1 million in back pay. They want to be reinstated at 05. They don't think it's fair that all this stuff happened to them. But I sat there and just went, be grateful that you're even being allowed to serve again if you truly want to serve this country. But when you're constantly tagging the Secretary of War, you're tagging Secretary Tata, you're tagging the President of the United States, and you're constantly bashing them and slamming them because they're not giving you what you want because you're acting like a child, you're going to get shut out of the room. You're not going to be allowed to have those conversations anymore. If you're there to get photo ops and you're there for the grift, that you're demanding a task force be reinstated to get justice for something you've only dealt with for 3 to 4 years. I've dealt with my case for 15 years, and there are pictures I've taken with people that I don't post. When I meet with people, we don't talk about all the conversations we had because our elected officials also want privacy and they want discretion and they want to be able to build trust. And I think you and I have mastered those abilities in the background. We don't talk about everything that we do. We publish some things, but we have to use discretion because these public officials are very important to our constitutional republic and they can't feed and make everybody happy. But if they can make the small changes without you demanding some kind of recognition or some kind of Instagram post or whatever else it is, they're going to be more willing to work with you in the future. The problem I'm seeing now is all these people that were given access to the Secretary of War on some of these military reforms that are very simple to make and I think are justified. And it's a slow process. Everyone's like, I can't believe they don't have all these people reinstated and the situation fixed. I'm like, yeah, it's been 3 years, buddy. I've been doing this for 15 years and my situation's still not fixed. The government is a slow, giant, overweight, fat ship that's going to take years for them to turn that rudder, right? And you have to be patient. I am patient. You are patient. We still do the work. But what I see that hurts the veteran community so much is when they try to rope people like us into that group. And then when they see people getting tagged or shared or you're smashing every single elected official for not getting exactly what you want because you're acting like a kindergartner, then you're not going to be brought into the room anymore. You're not going to get that access. And what does that result in, Brian? It results in you and I, once again, by ourselves, walking the halls of Congress because we're the ones that are still willing to do the work and put forth the effort. But, the problem is people want fame. They want a book deal. They want the pictures. They want to get invited to the next so-called fancy party. I'm not there for fancy parties, man. I'm not there for anything other than to do the right moral and ethical thing to fight for our veterans and do the right thing. And I think that's the problem is, and this is, I think, what going back to our elected officials, right, is that they get so wrapped up into the glitz and glam of DC and the cigars and the whiskey and, the Capitol Hill Club or whatever else it is, that they forget that at the end of the day, we still have to shit, eat, and sleep like everyone else does. And, the clothes that we wear don't matter. It's who we are inside that counts. And when you get caught up in DC and everything else, and you forget where you came from, and you forget your roots, and you forget that first day as that dorky 18-year-old who rose your right hand to swear the Constitution of the United States and then put on that uniform and how proud you were seeing that American flag on your arm, I think people forget about that. Now, I remind myself of that every single day. And I remember that I am not better than anyone else. Even General Mattis and even the Marine Corps talks about it. Leaders eat last. Right. And there's a reason for that. And I think you and I have, because I did a small stint in the Marine Corps and you had your entire career in the Marines and I still think they're the best fighting force in the world in the U.S. military. I could say that even as an Army guy, but be humbled, be grateful that we live in the greatest, freest country in the world. And until you really step into third world countries like I have and like you have, and you see what goes on overseas, we don't have issues. We just like to create issues because we have so much to be grateful for that people are ungrateful for. And I think that's the problem in DC and why we see things moving so slowly when it comes to veteran issues is because people get wrapped up in the grift and the fame and the humanistic aspects of these hedonistic tendencies. And we don't need any of that. We just need a good cup of coffee, right? A couple good friends to do the right thing. And I think these are the people we need to continue to try to push into office. We need to remove the grifters. We need to remove the people that are there for the spotlight. Some of the guys I serve with, I'd put them in Congress immediately because you don't even know their names, but they're doing all the work for their privates, right? And those are the types of people we need to concentrate on becoming elected officials in our midterms. People think, because they're an incumbent, they've been serving for X amount of years, we can't challenge them. No, primary them. If they're not doing the work, they're not doing the job, they're not passing another tally bill, they're not passing the DeRito Act, it's time to primary them. It is time for us we have 2 more years of Donald Trump, and we are going to lose our butts in this midterm if we don't stand up and actually primary and put the right people into office because the Democrats are fueling the machine. We're going to have a low turnout. Midterms are historically low turnout, like 24% or something like that. And now is the time to take advantage of that. We need to inspire millennials and the younger generations to stand up for what they believe in, that we don't need a 50-year mortgage, that they can have a job, that they will be able to pay off their debt, that they can raise their kids. But you have to do it, not anyone else. Or maybe if you got a good friend who you trust and you want to back them, great. But it's time for us to realize that in order to change this slow-moving ship, we need to primary even our own Republicans that are not doing the work. We need to put moral and ethical people into service and to make sure that we have that servant leader that we all demand and that we all rose our right hand to serve underneath and to defend this Constitution.
Very well. It's funny, in Congress, we're always held to such higher standards being veterans. And I know I'm tired of it. And that's probably why there's a lot of veterans that feel so disenfranchised. My vote doesn't matter. My voice doesn't matter. I gave my body to this country and they have forgotten about me. And the sad thing is that the only people that haven't forgotten about them are veterans themselves. Yeah. Veterans ensuring veterans are getting the help that they need. And we all know that, again, the wheels of justice are very slow. The train on the track in 8 feet of quicksand with me pushing it, that ain't going to move. And if it does, we're going to get an inch here and we're going to get an inch here. And it takes years to get an inch unless you go out and you cause destruction in American cities, and then your voice is heard immediately. Now, will you lose credibility? Yes, but it does change the hearts and minds on how people vote. It will either do one of two things. It will radicalize a group that is already extremely radicalized, or it will say, yeah, those folks are nuts. I'm going to vote the opposite way because that is definitely not who I want representing them. But could you imagine if I went out and did some of the things that some of these influencers do in DC with a horrible mouth, horrible messaging, and then they still get interviews from the biggest members of not only the House, but in the Senate.
Yeah.
And if I were to go into DC and even say the F word toward another member of Congress, heaven forbid I don't do that. I honor, I operate with honor, courage, commitment. And they would they would shut me down. They would turn me off. I'd never have another high-level meeting in DC ever again. And I'd be known as, oh, yeah, that guy. But you could be, for an example, a jolly good ginger, this guy who walks around who looks like an absolute slob, who preaches nothing but horrifying propaganda to young folks to try to change their hearts and minds to literally vote against the good of our nation. 200 and nearly 50 years of this beautiful nation. Are we perfect? No. Are we the best country? Are we the best and brightest country in the history of mankind? Absolutely. And again, we are treated in a different way. We are categorized in a different group. And that right there should never be that way. The primaries are coming up. It's primary season from sea to shining sea here, starting early next year and in through the summer. We have very low turnout on primaries. Typically, is there a way that we could get a lot of young folks to the ballot box in the primaries and really start to take this back?
Yeah, and I'll give an example what happened to us when we were in DC. Like, a couple weeks ago, I was the national vice chairman of the American Veterans First Association, right? And I helped start that organization with a great veteran who's now serving the Trump administration, who had to step down when he went to the administration. But like I said, going back to the grifters in society, they went out and they decided to oust me from the organization with a secret meeting without including all the board members, even though I am. These are all my fellow veterans, right? Fellow veterans. Minus one who's not a veteran. And then you find out that they are getting phone calls from Colorado from a state senator, Kirkmeyer, who's now running for governor, and former Governor Bill Owens, who I am actively working to oust and remove from the political scene here in Colorado because they are toxic to the millennial generation. They acquiesce to Democratic moderate votes, and we're losing our gun rights, and we're transing the kids, so to speak, and our taxes are insane and out of control. So by myself, I've been going out to all the GOP meetings and trying to encourage delegates to vote for different people. And they don't like that because they've been in politics for 20, 30 years and they don't want to lose that grip on power, right? So when they come out and attack you and then they start making phone calls to DC and say, oh, DeRito, we heard from a state senator and the former governor that you're a bad person for Colorado. And I'm like, well, did you do any research and find out that we're trying to remove them, which is the entire intention of our organization was to put vets into office. And then, the organization collapsed under the truth of whatever came out. And now I am having all those people who were in the organization form a PAC, right? So we're going to counter with artillery, right? Is that you might hit us from the front. You might have flanked us in the beginning because you're going to see when you start getting involved, they're going to attack you. They're going to go after your character. They're going to slander you. They're going to libel you. They're going to do whatever it takes to stop you. When you start figuring out how the system works, you're going to do whatever it takes to stop you from that moment of influence. And like I said, I've realized, and I think you and I both realized, we can't do this on our own, right? And this is why I've been engaging so heavily with the turning point chapters of the universities out here and the young people, because I am never going to change the minds of the boomers. I'm just not. They are stuck in their ways. They like their little, running for office at 72 years old, so to speak, and keeping things the way they are. But there is a plan. And how we can do this is you need to look up your local GOP meetings, your county, your commissioner meetings, your town meetings, your mayoral meetings, everything else. They're all on the website. They're probably built by some 70-year-old guy on, some really bad website developer, and there's going to be minimal information, but there should be a phone number and a contact information, and contact them. Find out where the meetings are. Google them. Find out where these local meetings are. Put on a suit jacket, always dress to impress on everything you go to. You have 7 seconds to make a good impression, and just start showing up to the meetings. Learn who the players are. We're all in the military. We had to build our baseball cards, right? Who are the terrorists? Who are the HVTs? Who are all these other people? You have to do the same thing with your party. Who is controlling? Who is pulling the strings? Who's in charge of the votes? And the best thing that we can do at a minimal level, you need to become a precinct committee person. That is the lowest level of government involvement, okay? That's what we call them in Colorado. They have different names around the state, but basically in my county alone, we have 100 precinct committee people, right? There's like 2 per sector, and it's how the voting districts are drawn out in your county. And there needs to be about 2 to 4 people in every line, and that's what we're all worried about, the gerrymandering issue going on right now. This is what the Democrats and Republicans are fighting over, is that when they gerrymander these districts, right, there's a certain amount of precinct committee persons in those districts that are in charge of picking the delegates, right, which is the next level up, and the district captain delegate. And then those delegates are responsible for going to your state caucus, right? In your state caucus in a constitutional representative republic, your caucus committee members, right? Your state central committee, which in Colorado is a little bit over 400 people, right? So you have your precinct committee people, which is probably about, let's say, 2,000 people in the state, right? And then they pick the delegates. Then the delegates and then the state central committee members, about 400, right? So we're going big and we're going down and down because they're representative, right? They're the ones in charge of picking who's going to run for office, right? So you think, oh, I get my ballot in the mail and this, I can just pick who I elect. That's not actually, but did you put that person on the ballot? Brian, did you put that person on the ballot? No, you were just given a choice of Kamala Harris or Donald Trump for president. But maybe there was another guy who should have run for president or something else that you wanted, or your county commissioner. But now you're starting to understand, in order for us to pick the people that get printed on those ballots, it's all determined by your precinct committee people, your district captains, and your state central committee. So the easiest way that we can influence elections in a moral and ethical way is you become a precinct committee person. You become a district captain and you become a state delegate to the state central committee. And then you're in charge of vetting the candidates and electing at state caucus who is going to be printed on that ballot, even if that person is you. Right? If you're running for office, you need to whip all those votes and those delegates to make sure that they vote at least 30%, or you petition onto the ballot to be put onto those ballots so that the general public now, then you campaign and you try to get people to elect for you on the ballot. But when I had to learn that process, people just don't understand it, right? So the easiest thing you can do is become a precinct committee person at the lowest level. Start going to your local county commissioner meetings and learning how that process works and getting appointed. But you know what? You're going to have to go to a lot of boring meetings. You're going to have to go to a lot of 6:30 a.m. pancake breakfast on a Wednesday after you drop your kids off to school that you don't want to go to. But that's the sacrifice. Look, if you can stand in line at MEPS for 8 hours and do the duck walk, you can show up and be a PCP. Okay? It's that simple. And I learned in the process. I even ran for my county vice chair position. I tried to become a PCP. I got accidentally appointed as a district captain because it was default votes towards me. But then they find out, oh, this DeRito guy, the guy that's trying to pass the DeRito Act, the guy that's heavily involved in DC, he knows the system. And if he gets in the system, then he's going to pick delegates that are going to go towards his favored candidates. And then they try to stop you. Then Barb Kirkmeyer and Bill Owens are calling DC to try to trash my reputation to stop that process. But if there's 50 Doritos, they're going to have a harder time stopping that. So yeah, I may have gotten a temporary speed bump in my process, but that's not going to stop me from getting more people appointed. That's why I'm meeting with the Turning Point people. As long as you're over the age of 18, you can be a PCP, right? And as long as you're having these meetings, so you can do it, but you need to collectively work together. And the Democrats are so much better at doing this than the Republicans, because Republicans are very isolated and they're all individualistic and they always fight and everything else. But I'm telling you, the easiest thing that we can do to get the people that we want, especially veterans, I'm very much for veterans in office, on those printed ballots that go out in the primaries in June in Colorado and into the general election in November, is you need to be a PCP. You need to be part of that process. You need to select who you want and to get them printed on the ballot and vote and support that person and then campaign and door knock and everything else. But that is the easiest way to get involved, and it costs nothing.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.